For those that have missed the past couple of days or haven't watched every single video to watch the concession of kind of the falling domino chips that is Justin Trudeau's life, here's what's happened. You have proroguing that was circulating as an option, proroguing the government. And Freeland came out about midweek last week and said, no, we're not going to do that. So if we just wipe that off the table, what is left with the other options? Well, Jagmeet Singh and the NDP have gotten what they wanted from the Liberal government. Pharmacare is pretty much good to go, right? They've got contraceptives. That's done. The Bloc has said we want old age security for people that are of older age in Canada. The Liberals have said, nah, we're doing enough. And they have replied with, well, then we're going to call an election on October 29th if we don't get what we want. And last time I checked, it's almost that time. So proroguing's not an option. Then you have the NDP has gotten everything that they wanted. There's nothing else that the NDP can try to push for between now and even next October. That's it. They're not going to get any other things passed. And now you have Jagmeet Singh that's almost surpassing Justin Trudeau in popularity with the Bloc that's threatening to call off these elections. You have two motions of non-confidence that both got rejected within the past few weeks. And now you have 20 to 30 Liberal MPs that are saying, hey, we don't want Justin Trudeau as our leader. He's bringing the ship down with him. And we're going to stay anonymous for right now. But at some point, we might reveal who we are. That's kind of everything that's going on here in Canada. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video, everybody. Before we get into it, I do want to encourage y'all to smash the like button and subscribe if you haven't yet already. It does really help grow the channel. I believe we're past 410,000 subscribers and setting course for 411,000. So what we're going to be taking a look at today is just, again, a brief summary of this whole, loss of confidence within Justin Trudeau's cabinet. How you have people that are trying to almost conspire against him. And I call this the Joe Biden effect. I truly believe that Justin Trudeau is going to get Joe Biden. He's going to get removed and somebody else is going to come up and run in the next election. It's just a matter of who. Is it going to be Chrystia Freeland? I don't know. It can't be Mark Carney because he's not an elected official. So who is left? Well, I'm going to leave that up to you guys to decide. But without further ado, let's get into this because there's quite a few topics to take a look at, including radical environmentalist Stephen Guilbeault, who does a one-on-one with Vashi. And it's pretty interesting to see him spin in circles like a hamster. All right. So the time right now is 3:50, almost 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Let me just refresh the page here. There still has not been an update with the polls. So you still got Pierre with the projection sitting at 228 projected seats, bottom line at 200, top end 247, Trudeau at 53. Maybe, maybe within a couple hours after this video comes out, this will update, but I still stand firm on my belief that you're going to see Trudeau go from 53 down to mid 40s, 47, 46, 45 even. The Bloc at 42 and Jagmeet at 18. But here's where it gets really interesting. It's the popular vote projection. You see, Justin Trudeau is currently at 22% and Jagmeet federally is at 18%. And with this massive motion of, hey, we don't trust Justin Trudeau to run the Liberal, steer the Liberal ship anymore, I really believe that you're going to start to see that number 22 come down significantly. And I mean, Jagmeet did deliver on his promises, right, of pushing that pharmacare, even though Justin Trudeau did try to take credit. So by quite literal definition, he's doing good by people that support him, right? So I think for that reason, you might see him go up a little bit and actually overtake Trudeau because people are fed up with Justin, not just within the Liberal cabinet, not just people that are on the Conservative side, but more importantly, people that support him. They're fed up with him. Then you have 99% likely, excuse me, my brain can't keep up, or my mouth can't keep up with my brain. 99% likely across the board for winning the most seats and odds of a majority government. So that is looking really good. Now let's do a bit of a recap of this internal fracture within the Liberal cabinet here, because this is really going to be the downfall of Justin Trudeau, and he shouldn't look at this lightly. He should really re-strategize, and if he wants to run the full course of until the next election, whether that's in the coming weeks, months, or in a full year, Trudeau's got a lot of work to do.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is facing mounting pressure from his caucus to step down from the leadership of the Liberal Party. A group of backbench MPs reportedly in discussions over a formal ask. Here's CTV's Colton Prail.
Back from a whirlwind trip to Laos, the Prime Minister is returning to a political firestorm. A group of backbench Liberal MPs are in discussions that could see dozens formally ask Justin Trudeau to decide on his future as Liberal leader.
Parliament is a mess. The NDP have left the deal, and so now the MPs, I think, are even more inclined to say, look, where is our plan?
Pressure has been mounting for months. By-election losses, the resignation of the Liberals' national campaign director, and an MP publicly calling for Trudeau to resign have fueled the fire. But this comes after what sources described to CTV News as a secret caucus gathering away from the main meeting earlier this week, while Trudeau was out of the country.
More of the same isn't going to work. So either you go or something changes.
Some Liberals are standing by him.
I'm disappointed because Canadians expect us to be focusing on Canadians and doing this work. And I know my colleagues. I know that that is top of mind.
Already this week, the Conservatives are targeting other high-profile Liberals like Melanie Joly.
She continues to pander to Hamas supporters in the Liberal Party as part of her leadership campaign rather than doing her job.
The NDP says this is another example of a government not putting Canadians first.
It seems like the Liberals are focused on their own drama. They're caught up in their own drama. We're focused on people.
For Trudeau and any rogue MPs, timing could be an issue. The House of Commons is on a week-long break, and MPs won't be back in Ottawa until October 21st, making it harder to address the entire party.
Right. And so right now, because it is the holidays, right, it is Thanksgiving. By the way, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. I should have probably started off the video with that. You have Parliament that's not really doing anything, right? Everyone's gone back to their home. Everyone's taking time off. Not everyone as in all of us, but everyone as in these politicians. And the House does resume in 8 days from now. And so that's a lot of time. That's a lot of time for a lot of these text messages between different Liberal MPs, a lot of their group chats, whatever they got going on, these backdoor deals within the Liberal cabinets, within the caucus that we just don't know how this is going to turn out. But it's not looking good. There's just so much disagreement within Liberals. And I'll be honest, it's been a long time coming, right? Like last year, they did a massive shuffling. They took a bunch of front bench people, put them way back there, even downgraded people to being water boys, right? It's just horrible, like how bad the Liberal Party is crumbling, right? And that's not me saying I support the Liberals and I'm sad to see this happen. I just mean that the Liberals 15, 20 years ago are nowhere near what they are right now. Liberalism 15, 20, 30 years ago is what conservatism is today. So they've done this to themselves, right? They've done this to themselves. They just need to get rid of all of them and start fresh with like common sense people. But now let's take a look at, speaking of common sense, let's take a look at this crazy one-on-one interview between Vashi and radical wacko environmental minister, CN Tower climbing orange jumpsuit wearing Stephen Guilbeault. This is crazy here. So the PBO recently came out and said, okay, look, about the carbon tax, there's some things in there that, yes, fiscally, it is responsible, but there's other parts that the PBO has admitted that says, yeah, no, it does make people poor. It actually does make people have less money at the end of the day. And so even with the PBO admitting that, Minister Guilbeault still defends it. It's crazy, man. They're huffing their own farts at this point.
First debate over the consumer carbon price was reinvigorated this week. A hotly anticipated report from the parliamentary budget watchdog has both the Liberals and Conservatives claiming victory. The report reaches broadly the same conclusions as the previous analysis, namely most Canadians will get back more in rebates than they pay in carbon taxes by 2030 when the price reaches $170 a ton, even when including the direct and indirect costs associated with it. But most Canadians are worse off financially once all other economic impacts are factored in.
Now we only look at the consumer charge, so obviously the impact is lower. It's not as much of a negative impact. But still, on average, the average household is still worse off when taking into account the economic
Conservative leader Pierre is reiterating his call, meanwhile, for a carbon tax election.
And that report confirmed everything I've been saying about this horrible tax, this ripoff. It showed that 60% of Canadians pay more in the carbon tax than they get back in rebates. 100% of middle-class Canadians lose out.
I spoke with Environment and Climate Change Minister Stephen Guilbeault Friday following the release of the PBO's report. You said upon the release of the updated report that it, quote, shows that carbon pricing is the most cost-effective way to fight climate change. The report concludes, as we said in that introduction, that when the impact on the economy is factored in, the carbon tax ends up being a net loss for Canadians. So how can you reach that conclusion?
Well, two things, Vashi. First, I'm not the one saying that that carbon pricing is the most effective way to fight climate change. Page 9 of the Parliamentary Budget Officer's report says that most economists agree that it is the best way to fight climate change. Second, in your introduction, you said that the Parliamentary Budget Officer, when he looks at all of the other indirect cost or benefits to the economy, well, in fact, his report specifically says that he doesn't look at all the other indirect economic impact of carbon pricing. He does not look at the benefits of carbon pricing and the billions of dollars that it has generated in investment, thousands of jobs created. Like he specifically says, I didn't look at that. He also says, in terms of indirect economic impact, I'm not looking at the impacts of climate change to Canadian households, like how much this is impacting their budget on an annual basis. He says this is something I might do into the future, but he's not doing it now. What he says is when you look at the direct cost, he says most Canadians are better off than with carbon pricing than without carbon pricing.
Yeah, I guess to parse apart that answer, yes, when looking at even the indirect costs, right? So the debate has often said, you know, the price it attaches to the extra cost to food and stuff. Even when he factors that in, the rebate for the majority of Canadians will outweigh the cost that they pay. It's when he takes into account numbers provided, for example, by the government about the economic impact of the consumer portion of this, the impact it will have, for example, on investment income and incomes more generally, that he arrives at the conclusion he did. You pointed out two things. First of all, that he didn't model out the benefits or the jobs created associated with the carbon tax, nor the impact of climate change. On the first, and we'll go through both, on the first, what is the model for that? I have never heard from your government a specific amount of jobs that this tax specifically creates, because I think it's clear, just based on political reaction from like-minded premiers and politicians, not conservatives in this case. I'm thinking of David Eby and Wab Kinew and Jagmeet Singh and Andrew Furey, as well as people who are just existing in the world running small businesses, that they certainly don't feel that this has been responsible for economic development, for example.
We have published numerous analysis of the economic benefits, and there's been a number of independent analysis that have been published. But the consensus or the rough estimates right now is that carbon pricing is generating about $25 billion of annual investment in clean technologies, in renewable energy, in zero emission vehicle technologies, batteries, and so on and so forth. So that's and the other interesting thing about the Parliamentary Budget Officer's report is that he points to the fact that most Canadians are better off, except the wealthiest. And I think that's why if we're looking for a reason as to why Pierre Poilievre is so opposed to this, that's why. Because his rich friends, recently oil executive CEOs organized a fundraiser for Pierre Poilievre. They're putting pressure on him to put an end to this. I can assure you, Vashi, that oil executives aren't organizing fundraisers for me. Not happening. So I think if we're looking for a reason why the Conservative Party is
look at Vashi's face.
Carbon pricing, that's the reason.
But actually,
look, like I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I hate to admit this, but if the Liberals really if they stopped huffing their own farts and realized that if they did one small change, it would drastically improve their polling. And I've seen in the comments saying, don't tell them, Mr. Sunshine, don't give them that advice. But look, it's advice that helps all Canadians. I hate to just give it, but it's already publicly available. Pierre at the federal level has said it. And then you have John Russett at the provincial level, and BC has said it. Axe the carbon tax. Stop imposing the carbon tax on people. That's raising our fuel by 20 to 30 cents a liter. It's going to help alleviate that stress at the grocery store. Like that simple thing right there is such a drastic change that people are going to say, oh, well, that's good. But then the problem for the Liberals is that they've been holding on to this for so long. And so again, that's what's that called? Stockholm syndrome, where you're like attracted to your abuser or something like that. And that's how people would be. They'd say, oh, look, the Liberals they're making life easier for us. They've been making life difficult for you. So it's like a double-edged sword. They almost have to double down on their rhetoric, but it's driving them into that irreversible, deep hole that they're just never going to get themselves out of it. It's crazy. And look, I've seen some comments in my previous video about this where I said that exact thing. People are saying, don't give them advice. Don't try to help them. Look, man, whether it's the conservatives that get rid of the tax or the Liberals that get rid of the carbon tax, it doesn't really matter at this point who does it. We all just want it done ASAP. But of course, yes, preferably it's the conservative government that does that, because then that means they are in power. But either way, I think just removing the carbon tax would make life just a little bit better. A little bit better for people. But again, it would be such a 180 turn on their entire values, right? Price on pollution. They've been touting that for years. And so for them to do that, I don't see that in the playing cards. But if they did, wow. I mean, they'd get one clap. That's it. Just one clap as a bravo.
Actually, when you're looking at the fiscal side of things, yes, it does so that there is a progressive impact. When you're looking at the fiscal and economic portion of things or analysis of things, it's very broad-based that Canadians are worse off. It's not just the highest quintile. Is it perhaps that, and I separate the conservative criticism for a moment, because I know that's what your government likes to focus on. So much of that criticism comes from within your own ranks, progressive side of politics. Like, is Wab Kinew against this because he wants to help his rich friends? Is Andrew Furey against this because he wants to help his rich friends?
No, I think in both the case of Premier Furey and the NDP, whether it's the NDP in Manitoba, BC, or federal NDP, they cave to the pressure. I mean, there is a lot of pressure on progressive politicians around this. So the parliamentary budget officer says it's the most effective way of fighting climate change. Most economists who have written about this says it's the most effective way to fight climate change, including a Nobel laureate who got his laureate specifically for his work on carbon pricing. But the Conservative Party has decided to put pressure. And we saw Jagmeet Singh, for example, cave on carbon pricing after Pierre Poilievre came out and said, you should stop supporting carbon pricing. And that's what Jagmeet Singh did. And the same thing, unfortunately, with Premier Eby, for whom I have the greatest respect in British Columbia. We saw the rise of the Conservative Party in British Columbia. Same type of argument as federal conservatives on carbon pricing. And we saw the BC NDP cave under that pressure. It is, it would be much easier for me, Vashi, from a political perspective to say, okay, well, we'll stop doing that. But it's the right thing to do. If you're serious about climate change, if you're not serious about climate change, like Pierre Poilievre, then of course you don't want to do anything you don't want to put measures to fight climate change. And the planet and Canada can go to hell in a handbasket. He doesn't care. But if you're serious about fighting climate change, this is not the only way, but the best way of doing it. It should be the number one tool in your toolbox of fighting climate change.
What role, though, did your government play in sort of, I guess, promulgating the kind of pressure that you describe that ultimately bear down on more progressive politicians in this country? And I'll tell you why I ask more specifically. So you point to economists that have labeled this as a very cost-effective way of doing things. There's probably nobody more at the forefront of that, and someone I've been interviewing for years on this subject, than Professor Chris Reagan, whom I also interviewed when your government gave a carve-out to home heating, which primarily affected Atlantic Canada. The Prime Minister made that announcement surrounded by Atlantic Canadian Liberal MPs. Mr. Reagan, Professor Reagan at the time, anticipated that would be the death of this policy, as written by your party. So for you to be sort of critical of everyone else for caving to the pressure, what responsibility do you bear for being the architect of that pressure?
I think we're doing much better in terms of how we communicate this to Canadians. Next week on Tuesday, people will be receiving their quarterly payment in provinces where the federal pricing system is applied. We now have all the banks and financial institutions on site who will label it properly. It wasn't labeled properly before, so people didn't even know they were receiving it. We're seeing an increasing number of Canadians who understand that they're getting the Canada carbon rebate, that they're seeing the benefits of this. It wasn't like that 6 months ago, Vashi. So we've put in place a number of things to ensure that there is a better understanding by Canadians of the benefit of the Canada carbon rebate. And it's changing. It's changing the debate. For example, in July, last quarterly payment, more Canadians were talking positively about the Canada carbon rebate, and Canadians were talking about axe to tax. So we can shift the narrative on this.
That's factually incorrect.
And we have to sustain it.
Respectfully, though, Minister, I wasn't asking you about a communications difficulty. I was asking you about the role that your government played.
There's not a single person out there that says, oh, yeah, taxing us for a price on pollution, that makes sense. I'm happy to pay more in taxes. And whatever few amount of people linger out there that actually say that and truly believe that, you people are nuts. You people are nuts. Where are the taxes going? What technology is benefiting our climate from this? What type of research is this going into? Like, this is the thing. It's a massive amount of money. Not a single dollar of that money has gone towards fighting climate change. Not a single dollar. And this is insane. At a time where we are taxed to death without the carbon tax, adding in the carbon tax, it's not appropriate. It's not the right time. It doesn't make any sense right now. Our economy does not support additional taxes. And also, again, they haven't answered any questions. Justin Trudeau hasn't. This radical liberal climate activist hasn't answered any questions in regards to how is the money from the carbon tax going towards fighting climate change. Not a single peep. If you support this, as anyone out there supports this, what the hell are you even supporting? You're supporting just rhetoric. They haven't done anything. They're collecting money from you and I and all other Canadians to fight climate change, and they're not doing anything about it. They're not fighting anything. They're just collecting the taxes. It's so infuriating.
In creating the backlash to this by essentially offering a carve-out that was politically motivated to Atlantic Canada. And I know you're going to say it wasn't politically motivated, that there are other homes that qualify for this across the country, but 25% of the homes in Atlantic Canada use home heating oil versus I think it's 6% in the rest of the country. Plus, Minister Goody Hutchings came on this program about a year ago, somewhere in the neighborhood of that, and said that if other parts of the country wanted to qualify for a carve-out like that, they should elect more Liberals.
I can't speak to what my colleague said. What I can tell you is that in my home province of Quebec, where I am now, there are more Quebecers using home heating oil than in all of Atlantic Canada put together.
Not as a portion of the resources used, though.
No, not in, but in absolute terms, there are more people in Quebec that use oil to heat their homes than in all of Atlantic Canada. That's a simple fact. It's not proportionally, but in absolute terms. And the concept of carbon pricing is to incentivize different behaviors. And what we realized with home heating oil is that most of the people who are still using this form of heating systems tend to be poorer and not have the money necessary to invest into more efficient and cleaner heating systems.
Okay, so if you live in the north, if you live on the East Coast, if you live somewhere where it gets very, very cold, you're poor. You're poor. That's what he just said. That is so freaking ridiculous. Wow, I cannot believe that. Look, these heat pumps don't work in cold weather, not efficiently. When it gets to be minus 30, minus 40, which is a very real thing that happens for extended periods of time here in the Great White North of Canada, they don't work properly. What a ridiculous thing to say.
The pause is to help us put in place measures, and we've deployed hundreds of millions of dollars across the country, from BC to Atlantic provinces to the north, to help people make that transition so that I mean, if you're using this tool to incentivize change, but people can't change because they don't have the mean to it, then it may be working from an environmental perspective, but it's certainly not working from a social perspective. And
but that's kind of the point, right? That's the point that people in other parts of the country that aren't even using just home heating oil feel. They don't feel like it's easy to buy an electric car, for example, yet. And I know that your government has plans in place to help incentivize that further and help make that more affordable. But right now, they just don't feel it is. And they feel like unless they elect Liberals, that falls on deaf ears, pardon me.
Sales of electric vehicles have quadrupled in the last 3 years in Canada. In Quebec, 1 in 5 vehicles sold right now is an electric vehicle. In British Columbia, it's 1 in 4. It's happening. More and more people are moving to heat pumps from coast to coast to coast across the country, and we've deployed a system to help them do that. So we're not just saying climate change and fighting climate change is a societal challenge. So, of course, the federal government has a role to play. Provincial governments, most of them aren't, but they should be part of this. But we want to work with the public, which is why it's kind of a carrot and stick approach. So we put in place regulations and system like carbon pricing, but at the same time, we are helping people with, again, hundreds of millions of dollars, whether it's, and in fact, in terms of home energy retrofit, it's in the billions of dollars, heat pump programs, electric vehicles, renewable energy. That's how we will help Canadians reduce their dependencies on fossil fuels, go for cleaner, cheaper, and more efficient systems.
Minister, just before I let you go, I wanted to ask you one more question about in your capacity as a Quebec minister, and it's about essentially what's been going back and forth with the Bloc Québécois and especially their proposal to boost old age security. As a minister of Quebec, are you okay with the Bloc determining government policy?
No, absolutely not, which is why we voted against this. So their proposal, we're certainly in favor of supporting seniors, which is why we brought back the retirement age from 67 years, which the previous government, Harper government, Conservative government, put in place to 65. We've put in place a number of measures to support seniors, but what the Bloc was proposing was fiscally irresponsible. It would cost $3 billion per year, and in many cases, it would go to people who don't need it. So we're certainly, and we've agreed to sit down and talk with the Bloc in terms of what other measures that we could put in place, but it was poor public policy, and we voted against it. We're not going to be held hostage simply to extend the life of our government to something that makes absolutely no sense from a fiscal and also from a social point of view.
So just to be clear, if you do put something more on the table through working with the Bloc, it will be outside of this measure specifically?
It won't be what the Bloc has proposed. So I'm not obviously personally involved in those conversations. I'm the environment minister. I'm not the minister responsible for seniors. But we have spoken about this as a collective, and we're willing to work with the NDP on this. Unfortunately, the Conservatives aren't interested in working on this with us. But so it's not the fact that there's no more formal agreement with the NDP doesn't mean that we're not talking to the NDP, doesn't mean that we're not negotiating on specific elements. I certainly am on a number of my bills and initiatives that the NDP want us to deliver. The oil and gas cap, for example, very important for the NDP. Well, we need their support if they want us to put this in place. So those conversations are continuing with many of the parties in the House of Commons, with the obvious exception of the Conservative Party of Canada.
Okay, I'm going to leave it on that note. Minister,
they are so delusional. So the reason why they are not voting with the Bloc to get old age security pushed forward is because the Bloc does not dictate, Quebec does not dictate what happens for the entire country. You got ego, you have greed, you have delusion, you have nonsense, you have corruption. All those 5 things is what best defines the Liberal Party. And this is why they are going down into the shitter, and it's unlikely that they will ever recover. I've made this prediction in the past where I think that you're going to see them in really bad standing with Canadians for the next 10 to 15 years. I think that it's really stained the country and left a sour taste in everyone's mouth, and more importantly, everyone's pocketbooks, everyone's bank accounts. I mean, it's horrible what these people have done. But I'd love to know your thoughts and concerns down below in comments about any of the topics that were covered. This is the end of the video, everybody. On your way out, I'd like to encourage you guys to smash the like button and subscribe if you haven't yet already, and we will see you in the next one. Once again, happy Thanksgiving. Bye for now.